What's up guys, Mr. Basie here, and today we're going to be going over some tips and tricks for beginners. Now, my first video did really well, and a lot of you guys feel like you enjoyed those tips and you felt like they were really good. I think this video is going to be even better than that, so hopefully you guys do enjoy this. If you want to check out the first video beforehand, go ahead and click on the card above. It'll also be in the outro as well, and I have an even more advanced video on the warrior class that'll be linked in the card above and in the outro, in addition to the previous tips video. I'll also be working on an assassin guide coming out later this week. So we're going to be elaborating even more on some of the previous tips that I touched on, but first, let's get into some of the new stuff. That being legendary gear and its status effects when crafted. Oftentimes, you'll find that legendary gear has status effects. It's commonly noticed on the weapons, but armor also has it as well. I would really make it a habit to check out what status effect you get on your armor, because it really can be pretty useful. Things such as faster ability recharge is going to further introduce ways for you to customize your playstyle from game to game, and knowing the advantages you have from all your kit is only going to make you a better player. So definitely make it a habit, just like it's habit to check out the weapon ability. If you haven't been doing that, I would definitely suggest making it a habit to look at both of them. It really will make it so that you play better if you know your kit and what you're working with game to game. Next up is going to be the assassin class is the hardest to play. Now I'm going to be coming up again with an assassin class guide that's going to go through all of this and teach you guys how to play it better, but let's go ahead and talk about why it's the hardest to play. If you have been playing assassin because it maybe looks cool or you like the idea of playing assassin, you may actually want to rethink it a little bit. If you're new to this game, potentially you feel like you should be doing better and you use assassin a lot, that really could be the reason for it, honestly. It has a lot of useful abilities, but it's not as good for one-on-one fights as most other classes. If you came from Fortnite, I would honestly recommend, despite how frustrating it is to, come across, I would definitely recommend, going with the engineer class. Now, I do find it the easiest to play, and it will translate more smoothly from the building aspect of that game. Try him out and move on once you feel you're more comfortable. Maybe move on to some of the other high damage, classes, and then, I think that's what you should do. You shouldn't go right from engineer to assassin. Try engineer first, move into the other classes, and again, wait for that assassin guide, because we're going to be going into even more detail about why it's the hardest to play and the ins and outs of that class. So I know I'm not talking too much about exactly, the reasons why the assassin class is hard to play, but it really does come down to the fact that its abilities are just not great compared to the other classes in terms of damage output. They are really good in their own right, but not so much one-on-one, especially if you're not an experienced assassin player. It can be very difficult. So let's go over some new keybinds. A lot of people enjoyed the keybind section of the previous video, so we're going to speak a little bit more and elaborate on that very briefly here. So as you know, I spoke about it in the previous video. You may find the ones that I have now, because I have changed them since the previous video, to be a little more easy on you if you thought the other ones were more complicated. Now before, if you guys haven't watched the previous video, I remapped my abilities to X and C. That's just something that's comfortable for me. I felt it was more comfortable than 1, 2, 3, 4. I moved it to X and C for my ability slot 1 and 2. Since then, I've actually put them onto my mouse side buttons. I find this is a little bit better because if you guys look down at your keyboard, or if you kind of can envision a keyboard if you don't have one in front of you, X and C, by pressing them, I have to take my finger off of the D key and or move my middle finger towards X and C, which is not only awkward, but also takes me away from being able to move backwards. So I'm either not able to move to the right or move backwards. So moving it to my mouse buttons allows me to aim my, abilities the way that I would have otherwise, but still maintain all the movement that I would otherwise have if I wasn't using an ability. So I find it a little bit better. Yes, it's a little awkward at first. It does not feel natural. It feels much better to have your weapons there. But honestly, once you get used to it, it really is a little bit better in my personal opinion. Also, I actually just use my scroll wheel to cycle through my two weapons. It really doesn't make a difference, to be quite honest. There's a very generous scroll amount before it cycles back to your currently equipped weapon. I just do a quick little roll of the scroll wheel and I get to my next weapon. I really only use X and C now to pick up a weapon off the ground and swap it out for another. So it really it turned out to be a really good switch. So next up, we're going to talk about one thing that's going to improve your gameplay as much as probably, maybe not as much as, but in a similar light to how I mentioned not to jump as much in the previous video. This one is going to be don't crouch as much. That may actually come as a surprise for some of you. You're probably like, you know, shocked because a lot of you probably play a lot of FPS games, and just like in those games, in this game, crouching does help you evade people getting headshots, which of course do additional damage in this game. But they also slow you down, and you don't move as fast while you're crouching. So since there's no movement penalty in this game, it really doesn't make sense to enact your own by crouching all the time. Instead, I would say keep crouching to a minimum and really use the speed of your character to its advantage, especially against those more accurate weapons. It will also allow you to focus more on your aim rather than thinking so much about incorporating a crouch into your strafe at really sporadic and random intervals. This can sometimes be difficult for some new players, or even some players in general. You know, it's not a thing to be ashamed of, but it can be more difficult, and most importantly, can detract away from your aim in some cases. So as with jumping, there's a time and a place for it. You need to use your experience to guide you in knowing when it is right and wrong to do it. But as before, it is just a general good rule of thumb to not crouch, or simply just do it less frequently. I would recommend maybe instead of doing it so much back to back, maybe incorporate it as an extended time. Use the fact that you slow up to your advantage. If someone is engaging you and you've been moving fast the entire fight, having an instance where you just slow up and continue to move in a certain direction may throw them off. Like, they've been used to you moving at that speed. They're calculating for it as you move left and right. But you stopping, or maybe not stopping, but slowing down as you crouch and move, you know, if you move fast to the right and then crouch slowly to the left, that may make it, you know, a little bit awkward for them. You know, you just have to vary it up, or maybe introduce, you know, crouches every once in a while, but definitely don't do it like crazy amounts. You know, even though you may feel like you're actually, you know, able to dodge shots more, a more experienced player is going to see it for what it really is, and it's you slowing down. So if you stand up and move left and right, you're going to be a much harder target to hit than if you were to just, you know, keep crouching and slow yourself down. Additionally, when you crouch, your head goes more towards your chest area, you know, when you're, you know, in terms of eye level. And that's generally where people aim. A lot of people don't really aim for the head as often, in my experience. So if you crouch, you may actually open yourself up to a headshot that would have otherwise been happening. You know, the head in and of itself is a lot smaller than the rest of the body, and it does pay to not make it as, you know, wide of a target if you can help it. So one of the last things we're going to talk about is many weapons are really not worth picking up in the current build of the game at the time of making this video. This is widely subject to change. I wouldn't be surprised if it changed the day after I made this video, but as it stands now and until it changes, there are certain guns that just don't make sense being in the game as it stands. So to clarify, there are some weapons that have the same stats, but are slightly worse for one reason or another. Not to say you shouldn't pick them up, but there are, you know, if there are no other options, you know, but most times there will be better options for you. You know, a great example, fantastic example of this would be the shotgun or the sword. The sword is very limited, of course, in range. The one benefit to it is that when you land a hit, you're guaranteed a set amount of damage. The downside, again, is the range. If you're using a shotgun, not only does it have better damage to begin with, you know, tier to tier, if we're talking, you know, common to common and uncommon or rare to rare and things like that. So tier to tier, it has better damage, and it has more versatility. So I would highly, highly recommend, if you ever come across a sword and you're thinking, what do I take, the sword or do I take the shotgun? Take the shotgun. As it stands now, there's not much point of the sword being in the game, aside from being extra variation with weapons. And maybe for someone who's not as good at aiming, maybe you can use the sword to guarantee that you're getting a certain amount of damage. But you know, you have to completely expose yourself to use the sword. You have to be right up in their face, which opens you up to high damage. And of course, with a shotgun, you could just peek shot if you really needed to and accomplish the same goal. Another great example of this would be the heirloom rifle and the slug shot. So as it stands now, the heirloom rifle and the slug shot have very similar damage. They have the same fire rate. Matter of fact, the heirloom rifle is slightly more powerful, and the bullet travel time of the heirloom rifle is a little bit faster. Now, this isn't scientifically documented or anything, but from my experience, I noticed that my bullet travels faster through the air to the target a little faster with the heirloom than it does the slug shot. Now, when it comes down to it, this has been changed in the past. So again, I really don't think this is going to stay the way it does, because as it stands right now, there's not really a reason for the slug shot to be in the game. The heirloom rifle is basically a better version of the slug shot, tier to tier, and it just doesn't make much sense. Now, how they had it a little bit ago, I'm not sure exactly when, but the slug rifle essentially remained as it is now, a slow firing, accurate weapon. The heirloom rifle was actually being used more as a fast up, kind of up close, close to medium range weapon. It didn't have very good accuracy. They changed it from having, pinpoint first shot accuracy to being not great accuracy at all. It shot a lot faster, I think did a little bit less damage, but the thing about it was, even though there was a great contrast between slug shot and heirloom rifle, it was kind of impeding on the, crossbows range. That's kind of the benefit of the crossbow, is it not? And that is, I think why they reverted back, because I think they wanted the crossbow to be that kind of weapon, and the heirloom rifle and the crossbow were competing with each other, similar to how the slug shot and the heirloom rifle are now, where they're back to where they used to be. So I think we're going to see some stark changes coming in the future, specifically between those two weapons and the shotgun and the sword. I feel like the sword will probably get a damage buff. It'll probably end up doing more damage than the shotgun, considering it's so much more specific in its use case scenario, and you have to open yourself up much more to damage. So I think they're very likely to change. I wouldn't be surprised if they changed like tomorrow or something like that. But again, these are things you want to keep in mind. Take this particular segment with a grain of salt. Look at the different damages, the different fire rates and things like that. Take those into account. You know what I'm saying? This is not to say you should take a rare over an epic or a legendary. It's saying tier to tier, those specific weapons just don't make much sense right now. You might as well take the other one. They're just a little bit better and or a little bit more versatile with their engagements. And last but not least, we're going to talk about how this game, like a lot of other third-person games, has right side advantage. Now, right side advantage is something I personally disagree with. It's in a lot of third-person games, as I mentioned, and it's essentially the concept of the fact that you have your gun on your right-hand side. Therefore, despite the fact that your aim might be somewhere about the center of the screen in terms of your reticle, you're not actually going to be able to shoot your weapon unless you are clearing whatever wall or surface that's in front of you. So if, for example, you are fighting an enemy on a completely square building. There's no way to enter the building. Let's just keep it simple so you can kind of visualize this. But there's no way to enter the building. It's a complete square. And you can either push around the right or you can push around the left. If you push around the right and your opponent pushes around the left, you're going to find that you're able to kind of peek shot a little bit better. You're not going to have to expose yourself as much, and you're going to be able to see them and do damage to them before they can do damage to you, because their gun has to clear that wall before they can actually get the shot off. Now, this is notorious for pretty much all third-person shooters, except a few instances, and we're just going to use another battle royale to keep things simple. One of the games that does this correctly is PUBG. PUBG allows you to change your the side that your gun is on from left to right. So you're really never in an engagement where it's an unfair advantage just by the chance that you happen to not engage someone on a right angle or on the right side of any sort of given piece of cover. So I definitely recommend, as it stands now, unless they make some changes in the future where you can change the side that your gun is on, definitely try to engage people from the right. If you're gonna, dip away and then come back later, definitely try to plan it out where you're coming from the right. It's just gonna help a lot with the, again, they're not gonna be able to see you as long. You're gonna be able to peek shot. You're gonna be able to do things like that. And it's going to make it a lot harder for them to shoot you, and vice versa. If you're versing somebody and you notice they have right side advantage, you may actually want to just back down and try to engage from another angle where you have that right side advantage. Again, that's essentially why I find it not to be as competitive, but since it's in the game, we got to deal with it, and that's something that you definitely need to know if you're going to do well in this game. So these are just some of the ways you can basically, you know, improve your game. Hopefully they did help you guys out. I'd love to hear about it in the comments about what you guys thought of these tips and how you were able to implement them, and if they helped you in game, you know, if you were able to translate them from the video right into your game. I'd love to hear about it. Again, hopefully it did help you guys out. If you guys did enjoy, definitely make sure you subscribe and turn on post notifications so you don't miss a beat. And as always, if you guys don't know, I do stream on a daily basis aside from Saturdays. We do all sorts of things ranging from, of course, battle royales and competitive shooters to let's plays. If you are at all interested, I definitely urge you guys to come out, have some fun with us. It's always a blast. You guys are awesome, and I love having you guys there. It's so much fun. If you're interested in that, of course, you can check the streaming schedule so you know when I'm streaming. It can be found in the community Discord, which is linked down in the description below. With that being said, this has been Mr. Baezy, and I hope you guys have a great day.